From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It's the top of the week, which means it's time for strange news. We have outrage in Mexico. We have conspiracy theories about COVID-19, but not the kind you might expect, and not from the place you might assume. And in other news, someone may have stolen the Ark of the Covenant. Yes, that Ark of the Covenant, the same one referenced in both the Bible and then later the Indiana Jones film franchise, which are two weird bookends to put on that, I guess.
And if you're a longtime listener of the show or viewer of the YouTube channel, you know that we have attempted to find the location of the Ark of the Covenant multiple times, and we thought we narrowed it down, at least if one really did exist, where it probably was. And this story is bringing that all home.
Is that the one where the Nazis get their faces melted?
Yeah, in Indiana Jones. Yes.
Yeah. Not the Ark. Yeah, got it. Yeah. Not the Bible version.
Right, but that Indiana Jones scene is based very loosely on some of the warnings about the biblical Ark, which is, how one should or should not gaze upon it.
It does turn out there are no Nazis in the Bible.
You're right. In the version that most people use, I would assume there might be a couple of independent interpretations.
A remix version floating around that Hitler put forth.
And there's always somebody writing a third testament throughout history of one sort or another. Well, if that's okay, then guys, let's start with that story. So spoiler alert, by way of background, what Matt's referring to when he says, we looked for the Ark of the Covenant several times over the course of the show. That is true. We were intensely interested in this. Stuff they want you to know always loves hidden history and historical mysteries. The Bible is full of those, or the stories, places, people, events, artifacts depicted in the Bible are always of great interest to historians. Like we've seen in other explorations of history, the world eats the works of man, so it can be incredibly difficult to verify things that happened in the 11th century, much less things that happened back in what we call the BCEs. So it's tough to figure out where facts and myths begin. But the Ark of the Covenant is a little bit of an exception. So basically what it is a gold-covered wooden chest, and it's got a lid over it. And according to the story, it contains the 2 actual stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. And then you'll see other biblical sources saying it contains a pot of manna, Aaron's rod, and so on. The weird thing that we found was that for a very, very long time, there has been a group of people in Ethiopia who claim to possess the actual 100% genuine Ark of the Covenant. And keep in mind, Ethiopia itself has a storied ancient history, and in our earlier works, we dove into the possibilities that it could be there. And one of the things that we found, or something they believed to be the Ark could be there, we should say, important distinction. One of the things we found is that the story of the Ark ending up in Ethiopia is true in that there is a church that claims to possess it and has for a long time. And Matt, I know you'll recall, it seemed that the keepers of the Ark were sincere. Their only rule is that they can't let anybody other than the priest view the ark, but they will
Yes.
gladly describe it to you in detail consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's a point of contention because it feels like if you truly did have the arc of some, you may want to show that off for numerous reasons, if not only to in some way make money to better secure that arc. But, what we've read and what we've seen over the years is that one of the main reasons for not letting anyone see it is to kind of keep this air of mystery about it, because if they do truly have it, they want to protect it. And it struck us, and it strikes me currently right now as one of the main reasons that it feels like it might not be genuine. Because it's almost like you could tell the tale of what this glorious ark looks like that you're keeping back here. It's just behind this wall. You can't go back there. But no, it's there and it's glorious. And let me tell you all about it. It strikes you as maybe not being genuine. But when something like, the story that we're getting into today comes out, it does make you feel like maybe there was something back there.
I think it's important to say too, just in general, holy relics or like physical objects that are associated with religion are super powerful, because it's almost like, proof positive, like this is real. See, I have this thing that like proves the existence of God or proves the existence of a particular, dogma, like the Shroud of Turin, for example, which is like this piece of cloth that supposedly was Jesus's burial, shroud or whatever. Things like that have a lot of political power.
True. And I like that you're differentiating between political power and maybe supernatural power. Yeah,
absolutely. That's exactly what I meant. Yes.
Reliquaries are hugely important because for true believers, just a reliquary, for instance, is the container of a body part of a saint. So those things are hugely important for both of those reasons that you just described, Noel. They may prove the physical existence of that saint or holy figure. And then they also are, and I don't mean to sound cold when I say this, just historically look at it. It's great marketing. It's a mark of prestige for the church or the institution that has it. What makes us different from the church in the next village over? Well, we have the two thumb bones of, Saint Martin on toast, which is hopefully not a real saint. And I apologize if that is a real saint and I've offended anyone. But yeah, Saint Martin on toast, patron saint of thumbs. We've got his thumbs. Come to our church service. This problem or this phenomenon is at its most extreme degree when we're talking about something like the Ark of the Covenant. One of the explanations or rationales behind not showing this to the uninitiated is that you'll recall in the in biblical writing, the men of Beth Shemesh gazed upon the ark, and as punishment, God smote 70 of them, or 50,070 in some translations. Again, all this stuff happened a long time ago.
Can I say I'm a huge fan of the tense smote. To smite, one was smote. But I also love that it also applies to being like in love with somebody, to be smitten. It's a funny etymology there.
So that's their reasoning. This is a thing that's happened. A lot of folks in the West aren't aware that to the true believers of this theory, the mystery of the ark was solved long ago. But fast forward to the modern day. Ethiopia is one of the oldest countries in the world that's been extant from its inception to the modern day. It's believed to have developed as a country all the way back in 980 BCE. So Ethiopia was around during the days of early Christianity. Ethiopia was around when a lot of the events depicted in the Bible occurred. I mean, not Genesis, but you get the gist of what I'm saying, the genegist of what we're saying here. So Aksum, Ethiopia. The place is the Mariam Tision Church, also known as the Tewahedo Church, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. And this location claims to be the home of the biblical Ark of the Covenant. It was moved, apparently, to the Chapel of the Tablet, which is adjacent to the old church, because get this, a divine heat from the tablets within the ark had cracked the stones of the previous storage facility. It was actually Emperor Haile Selassie's wife, Empress Menen, who paid for the construction of the new chapel. So this happened in recent history, but even more recently, this holy site was under attack. And the locals, just to give you the headline here, the locals are convinced that part of the motivation for the attack, which killed around 750 people, was to take possession of the biblical Ark of the Covenant. This is per the Europe External Program with Africa, and the Ethiopian National Defense Force reported to them that the church had been attacked and hundreds of people were hiding in the church. They were brought out into the square and shot. You can look at video showing the aftermath of the massacre. The military has been fighting with anti-communist insurrectionary forces that control parts of the region. So we can't dismiss the enormous tragedy of almost 1,000 people dying in this attack. But we also have to ask ourselves, why wasn't this reported more often in the West? Like anywhere, really? Yeah.
I cannot find a publication that has any of the information there. The most trustworthy news source is that it's from that EEPA.be, the Europe External Program with Africa. Mm-hmm. And it's just it's a tiny little sentence essentially that describes this thing.
Yeah. So the EEPA report is the most credible source I could find here. And it does prove that people were attacked by a force including 8 tanks, 20 buses, 5 heavy trucks. I mean, people were hiding in the church to survive, not for fun. But this report does also specifically mention the local concern that the ultimate goal of the attack was to remove the ark from its resting place, or the alleged ark, we should say. Although to the point about lack of Western coverage, my thought was, could it be possible that people were mentioning the Ark of the Covenant here as a way to get more coverage from the West? Is that what the aim was? I mean, I'm not accusing anybody of trying to put their fingers on the PR scale here, but as we were taking this apart, and again, there's not a ton of reporting on this, especially not in English. As we were taking this apart, we found that there is an information war going on. And Ethiopian listeners, please write in and let us know your take on the ground, or if you know anybody in the region, what they think of this. But because we've seen people saying that some folks are welcoming this anti-communism group, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. It seems like there are shifting opinions at times between the government, between support for the government and support for the insurrectionists, which, if you think about it, does have a certain type of logic to it, because the insurrectionist or the TPLF would be made of people from these regions often, right? It's not an outside force is what I'm saying. Also, there's a tricky thing I noticed. The Tigray group has been called anti-communist, but then they've also been called communist. And then one time there was a coalition with the government. So now they're being called ethnic rebels. It's like the story and the reporting keeps shifting. Everything about this story is tricky. But what do you guys think? Do you think, okay, first, do you think it's feasible that violent groups would attack these kinds of institutions to sell artifacts and, historical documents and stuff? I think that's 100% possible. I think it's a huge business. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it too much trouble? I mean, 750 people dead.
I don't know, man. It feels like it would be worth it to sweep that church, right? If you have a military convoy moving through the area, that church is essentially on the way. Why would you not sweep the church for some kind of, as terrible as it sounds, another way to fund the war effort, right? But I think that would be the only reason. There's a story out of Reuters that is from last year, like late November, early December, and it's talking about some of the same types of missions. Title is Ethiopian military operation in Tigray is complete, Prime Minister says. That's the title of the Reuters article. And it's describing similar things where many thousands are believed to have been killed throughout this campaign, or since 2018, at least, when the fighting kind of began, as well as, countless people fleeing to Sudan and other countries. And it's describing some of the same things that we're hearing in this latest report. It's feeling like, and again, it's weird for me to trust Reuters, but I do trust Reuters, more. I found that the other story in a couple of places, but I do trust them in some weird way. And maybe that is my own, I don't know, cognitive dissonance of some sort, but it's just showing that this is an early report that we're telling you about today. And that may be one of the reasons why we're not hearing more about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We could do an entire episode on the illegal antiquities market. I think the most famous example in the West is probably World War II. But don't assume that was just one, that was just some sort of historical one-off. The war in Iraq led to the looting of the museums of note in that part of the world. There's a thriving international art trade, partially for money laundering, which I think I don't think it's controversial to say that at this point. But my last question for you guys before we move on, could there be something to this story? Could there be, supernatural or not, some kind of artifact as old as the Ark of the Covenant? I appreciate bringing up Shroud of Turin because it's conclusively proven that is probably a myth, I think, from the 12th or 13th centuries, I want to guess. But but maybe is this Ark the same thing, or is it just something like so much time has passed? It would be amazing if it was just some other box or some other container from around the same time. We would still learn so much from it.
Really quickly, guys, for the longest time, even back, when I first started hearing about Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, I always assumed that it was Noah's Ark. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. How come you can call a giant boat an ark, but you can also call a gilded box an ark?
Well, I mean, it both carried something significantly important if the tales were true, right?
Yeah, but is an ark specifically like a housing for important things, or is it just like a vessel of any kind and maybe just like a more antiquated term? I'm assuming that's the answer, but I don't really know.
Well, it's the definitions are both. The archaic definitions are both a chest or box or a large flat-bottom boat specifically, but the one that's accepted often now is a vessel or sanctuary that serves as protection against extinction, which could kind of apply to the box as well.
Oh, that's good. That's a good one. I like that definition. Fascinating. Okay, well, there you go. I feel like I've solved a personal mystery, even though it was simple as a Google away. But yeah, fascinating story, Ben.
So back to my question that I had just asked, is this do you think there could be something there? If there's a box, is it roughly the same age as we believe the Ark of the Covenant to be? Is it a hoax? Could it have some actual, I don't know, something weird about it? Cracking foundations via heat from tablets it's possible for a heat source to crack a stone foundation, but I feel like maybe just time could account for that. I don't know.
For sure. I mean, historians and archaeologists have long kind of quibbled over whether this thing could possibly exist. There's a great article in National Geographic as why the Ark of the Covenant is one of history's enduring mysteries by Richard A. Lovett and Scott Hoffman. And there's a really interesting quote from National Geographic Society fellow Fred Hebert, who believes this quest to find this thing is ultimately doomed to fail. He says, "We're talking about things at the crossroads between myth and reality. I think it's great to have stories like that of the Ark of the Covenant, but I do not believe, as a field archaeologist, that we can use the scientific method to prove or disprove them."
Well, yeah, you could. You walk into the church and you go, "Show me the Ark," and they go, "No," and you go, "Show me the Ark."
Yeah, I was going to ask Matt, what do you think? It feels like there's something in there, right? And I know not to be all too seven about it, but there's, what's in the box?
Well, but that's the whole thing. Like, how can sure there might be a box or an ark, but is it the box or the ark? That's the whole. That's my whole point or question.
I'm gonna go with there's nothing in that room, and there's not a thing in there, and it's a place to worship. It's like it's a person that they're saying is the Ark of the. No, I'm just joking. I have no idea. Nobody knows unless you've been in there. And our call is for anyone who has been in that room. Tell us what you saw, or if you were just anywhere near that area when this went down, what actually happened over the past couple of weeks there.
And, if this were long form improv, we would end up saying, turns out the real Ark is the friends we made along the way.
Yes.
We're using a bit of levity here, but of course, the situation in Ethiopia is massively dangerous. It's unsustainable. It's being underreported, in our opinion. So we would love to hear once again from people on the ground or anyone who knows someone on the ground. Stay safe out there, folks. We're going to pause for a word from our sponsor. We'll be back with more strange news.
And we are back with another strange, kind of predictable news story, but still weird, about COVID-19, that old chestnut. So, how we reported on COVID-19 really before things got crazy. Not trying to pat ourselves on the back or anything, but when there really was a lot of mystery behind where this thing started, there were a lot of theories. We didn't quite know how bad it was going to get, but we've been following this for quite a long time and living it for what seems like an awful long time. And, the Trump administration used rhetoric pretty effectively to kind of hang the blame on China, which to the best of our knowledge, is accurate, that this virus was, did originate in China, potentially at this wet market that we described in Wuhan. But, a lot of the language surrounding it was kind of steeped in racism and othering, and we don't have to get into that. But China has finally kind of clapped back in their own sort of campaign of somewhat misleading and unverifiable information, and also just kind of trying to throw up a bit of a smokescreen to deflect some of the blame from themselves and deflect it back at us as a country. Some unsubstantiated claims coming from official Chinese government sources that the coronavirus may have actually not originated in Wuhan at all, but from a U.S. military lab in Maryland. And it is really starting to gain traction in the Chinese media, which isn't surprising considering that right now anti-American sentiment is at a fever pitch in China, which is again surprising to no one considering some of the divisive policies and rhetoric, out of the previous administration. Not only are they making these claims, they're also, through their state media, calling into question the efficiency or the effectiveness rather of Pfizer-BioNTech's vaccine after 23 elderly people passed away, through the clinical trials. So yeah, I mean, it's again, not super surprising, but it's interesting that it is gaining such momentum, and it doesn't seem to have very much steam in terms of actual, citations of where you're getting this information about, this lab that it supposedly originated in.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because this specifically says that the Pfizer vaccine is not only lacking in efficacy, but that it's killing elderly people, right? It's also fascinating to me because in the early days of the outbreak, China was cracking down hard on domestic narratives or statements that didn't fit the story they wanted to tell. And they called those things conspiracy theories, like the various Chinese scientists who were claiming there were problems with the story, or gosh, there was one expert who themselves died of COVID-19, and they were saying that the infection was much worse than state media was allowing to be reported on air.
I think there's no question that they were trying to muzzle folks that would get the word out. It was almost like a Chernobyl type situation where it's like, we know something bad is happening. We know in all likelihood, if we just did something about it or said something about it sooner than later, the world might be able to react more effectively. But we don't want a bad look and be held responsible. So instead, we're just going to hush everyone up and hope that it never gets out, which of course it was going to get out. So it just seems very counterintuitive. But that is the kind of response that the Chinese government is known for in terms of muzzling dissidents and, keeping information under wraps. Really quickly, the name of the base in question, or the military lab, is Fort Dietrich in Maryland. And the hashtag Americans Fort Dietrich started trending because of the Community Youth League in China. It started trending on Chinese social media, Weibo, where it was viewed, I think, something in the neighborhood of 2 billion times. And state media started calling on authorities to investigate Fort Dietrich as a result of this. So, kind of the example of them starting the hubbub themselves through the Community Youth League, which is a state organization essentially, or a state-sponsored organization, and then demanding that an investigation take place. The official quote is, "If America respects the truth, then please open up Fort Dietrich and make public more information about the 200 or more biolabs outside of the U.S. And please allow the WHO expert group to go to the U.S. to investigate the origins." And that came from Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying. And that was her speaking to the Chinese state media, which again, it's all kind of the same thing. It's all the same organization. All the hands are all shaking each other and working in concert. So it's hard to take some of these claims very seriously because they're kind of essentially just creating sort of a narrative that deflects blame from them. And we know that those origin stories are pretty well vetted, wouldn't you say? Or am I overstating the case there?
I would say they're more well vetted than the narrative here from the Chinese side. I was not aware. I had been looking at some of this stuff, but I was not aware how far back their story goes. Like they were saying, or elements of the Chinese media and government were saying this as far back as May of 2020.
That's right. That's a really good point, Ben.
Yeah. Well, they're specifically referencing. They didn't just pick Fort Dietrich, by throwing darts at a map of the U.S. From what I'm understanding, before they got to Fort Dietrich, they were looking for a way to, as you said, turn this blame on the U.S. So it's like, what is our very verbose version of "we're rubber, you're glue"? And,
right.
And the U.S. said much the same that you've said. They said that this was a clear attempt at defection. In July of 2019, there was a shutdown of what are called biosafety level 3 and level 4 types of work at USAMRIID. And that is the Army's Biological Defense Laboratory. So that part is true. It is a thing. It does study high-level pathogens and infections. But
things like anthrax, things that can be weaponized for germ warfare, biological warfare, essentially.
Well, that's the thing. Now it depends on who you believe, because a spokesperson for the Army Medical Research and Development Command said that USA MRIID does not take part in offensive research. But of course, why would you admit that if you did, right? Why would you be like, oh yeah, the original name for this lab was Smallpox City? Don't think they would do that. So it's tough to know what to believe, but I don't know. I don't see support that it came from the U.S. and then went to, was what? What's the implication? That was transported surreptitiously to Wuhan and then deployed there? Is that the idea?
It's unclear. Yeah, Matt, please.
Yeah, there's several narratives that came out over the last year or so, and a lot of them had to do with the United States traveling, a special envoy that traveled to China and then deployed it while they were there. Then the virus spread in China to look like it came from that area in Wuhan. There are other ones that former President Donald Trump, he and numerous others pointed to a very similar laboratory in Wuhan that, remember, we talked about this on a previous episode, that is supposedly where the weaponized version of this virus was released. It's interesting to me, in this AP news article, they mention that. And the last sentence in this article is, in speaking on the Wuhan laboratory theory there, here's the quote. While that theory has not been definitively ruled out, many experts think it is unlikely. But isn't that interesting that that's where the truth lies now? Mm-hmm. Something has not been definitively ruled out, but most people who know this stuff say it didn't happen.
Well, but it's also like a pretty smart, like, if you're gonna call into question this narrative, this is a pretty good location. This is already shrouded in some mystery. Like you said, Ben, did they work with anthrax and Ebola or didn't they? We don't even know, there's not even, so it's a really smart kind of way of, doing a little bit of a switcheroo kind of situation where people start to really question the truth if you repeat it enough. So, it's definitely a tactic for sure. And we'll see if it actually, has legs. But who is this for, is my question. Like, it's for the Chinese people, right? It's to stir up anti-American sentiment among Chinese citizens. It's not like it's going to change anybody's mind over here, right?
Not in the U.S., but that's a very back burner demographic. This conversation is meant for people in other regions of the world, non-NATO countries, for instance. It also gives some fuel to QAnon associated folks, and it is like, a lot of people don't understand this. So the CDC does a lot of stuff, right? It's also kind of a health inspector for some of these outfits. And what happened here is that Fort Dietrich, at high level research, they failed some health inspection stuff, just like a restaurant would, and a restaurant has to up its score. So some stuff did go wrong there, but it's a little bit of a leap to say that what went wrong was also somehow necessarily means this group was in secret creating COVID-19 and then maybe based off MERS or something, and then shipping it worldwide like some kind of evil version of FedEx.
But Ben, the TGI Fridays isn't handling infectious diseases on a daily basis.
That's
so
true.
their health rating is a little less important than the laboratory.
But but the analogy holds, I would say.
It does.
1,000,000%. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, you have to do a little bit of damage control. You have to steer the narrative a little bit, do some PR trickery, and that's absolutely what this is. Point totally taken, Ben, about this mainly being directed to other regions. Also worth mentioning that this lab was doing some of the earliest research with that kind of questionable cocktail of medication known as remdesivir, which I believe has since kind of been debunked as an effective treatment for the coronavirus. But it was something that was being pushed pretty heavily, especially by the Trump administration.
Yeah. So if you believe that there are some dastardly ne'er-do-wells at Fort Dietrich that are responsible for COVID-19, then wouldn't it make sense that they would also be some of the first people working on a quote unquote cure.
I mean, I have seen Utopia now. Man. They wrote this thing in 2017 or whatever year, 2016, whatever year it was. They wrote this entire thing. I'm telling you.
Well, definitely worth watching and seeing how this plays out in the bigger picture, but certainly interesting to see China kind of clapping back after quite a long time of, doing things like calling it the China virus and the Wuhan flu and the Kung flu and all that stuff, which again, lots of racist undertones and othering. And it's to your point, Matt, in previous episodes, words have power, and even if this is sort of a little bit of trickery, I mean, you can't really blame them for trying to deflect some of this, especially,
Right at the end here, can we admit that the three of us, don't know where this virus originated or where it started, right?
100%. I certainly don't.
And there is so much conflicting information out there and intelligence from various countries' intelligence agencies that it is difficult to know. And part of the giant struggle that humanity itself has faced throughout this is figuring out really where it began and how we can prevent this from happening again. I would just say questions remain, and it's tough to be certain right now.
I would be careful with, this is why I've always made that point about reading sources and language they use carefully. The best we can say now, the best anyone can say publicly, is that COVID-19, SARS-CoV-19, was first identified in Wuhan. But be careful with that phrase, because identified 100%. Is not the same thing as originating.
We also, were clearly misled by our own country as to how early the virus was identified here.
Oh, yeah. And it's happening again with the new variants.
Exactly right. So, I hate to, be the one suggesting don't trust anybody ever. But gosh, it's just that we keep getting, kind of fed a bill of goods, or sold a bill of goods. You don't really get fed bills of goods. I guess you could. But yeah, it definitely calls a lot of the stuff into question and makes it hard to have to really know, which I think is what leads to so much conspiracy theorizing and things like QAnon and all of that, because you can't really know. So why not just, go down the rabbit hole and get weird with it?
It's weird. I've had some really interesting conversations with some folks who got out of the QAnon belief system, and I've been debating whether I'm going to make contact with some folks who are doubling down. We'll see. More in the coming days, I think. But you're right.
It's a tough situation, right?
Well, it's a sunk cost fallacy, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and a little teaser, we'll be having a conversation about that very topic on this week's listener mail episode.
All right. And on that note, we are going to take a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with more strange news. And we are back, and we are coming to you with some news that is, at least the article that we're using as our primary source here is new, but it's an ongoing situation that's been developing for, goodness, over a year in Mexico, and it's something that U.S. authorities and intelligence agencies have been dealing with for longer than that. So I'll just read you the headline here. It's coming from The Guardian. It is, outrage after Mexico exonerates ex-defense minister in drug case. Okay, so ex-defense minister in some kind of drug case. Well, the person we are going to be talking about today is General Salvador Cienfuegos. He was arrested in October of 2020 while he was in the United States at a Los Angeles airport, and he was essentially being accused of being this person known as the Godfather with regards to some drug cartel activity within Mexico. It's a really tangled web here, but we're going to try and walk you through it as quickly as we can. So there is another story that we're going to refer to before we go back to that original one. It's from AP. It's titled "Mexico Clears General, Publishes U.S. Evidence Against Him." Okay, so in this article, it describes exactly what evidence the United States officials had against this General Cienfuegos. And it's essentially conversations between known associates of a cartel. They're talking on BlackBerries, and they were intercepted by the U.S. forces. And I'm going to read from this AP article to get you up to speed here. There were documents that the United States government released. These include intercepted text messages between the leader of the H2 cartel, based in the Pacific Coast state of Nayarit, and a top aide who allegedly served as a go-between with this group, the H2 cartel, and the general. This general was often referred to as the Godfather, and at one point as Salvador Cienfuegos Cepeda. There is one exchange where this person told his boss that he'd been picked up by men with short military-style haircuts and was taken to the Defense Department headquarters in Mexico City for a meeting with, quote, the Godfather. And this guy tells his boss that the Godfather let him know that we're going to do big things now. What we've done before was small time. And he says that as long as the Godfather is here, you will be free. That they will never carry out strong operations or raids. And there's more to this, and you can read all of it if you go to that article I mentioned there on the AP. But it appears that there was some kind of evidence that was taken up in eavesdropping on communications that was pointing to this person called the Godfather. And in one exchange, they actually have a person mention this General Salvador Cienfuegos, as the Godfather. So I guess they believed that all of this intelligence, together meant that this guy was probably the person they were looking for. So the U.S. picked him up in Los Angeles, and they tried to essentially make this case stick and charge him with some of these things, but it ended up not going that way. And he was released back to Mexico, and then Mexico dropped all the charges. And that's what this original article is all about. How upset some of the general public is at the thought that their government, at the most upper echelons of their government, could be working with drug cartels to ship money and drugs and whatever else between Mexico and Colombia, Mexico and the United States, and all these other countries, and to do it with impunity. And then when one of the top people gets caught, nothing happens to them because they're above the law.
Yeah, this is like, just for comparison, this is like the U.S. Secretary of Defense getting caught aiding and abetting domestic terrorism, and then not getting fired. It's like Canada catching the U.S. Secretary of Defense helping terrorists in a way that affects Canada. They go against it, they drop the charges and hand it back to the U.S. And the U.S. says, we're done here.
Yeah, everything's fine. I was so excited that you made that comparison. It's exactly what it is.
Well, there's context here too that I don't want to lose. One of the big pieces is, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm off base here, Matt, from what I understand, the president of Mexico, Obrador, was super pissed that the U.S. didn't tell Mexican officials that they were doing this investigation in the first place, which goes to the larger concern. Now, Obrador was a fan of the Trump administration, but that doesn't mean he can't get riled up about stuff, right? So the thing here that's fascinating is there is a not insignificant implication that the U.S. government or factions thereof may feel that the Mexican government is entirely compromised by cartels. I mean, it's also not a crazy, as conspiracy theories go, it's not super crazy because cartels, make a lot of money and they have compromised multiple police forces, multiple security forces. They control 70% of the drugs coming into the U.S. They're not hard up for cash and they're not hard up for influence. They also have no compunction about brutal retaliation.
Well, yeah, I can totally see that. There's a flip side to it too, though, that I think we've thought about and discussed on this show before. If the major actions that are being taken by cartels, if they were just manufacturing drugs and trafficking drugs, then you could save a lot of lives and a lot of money by just allowing that action to take place. That rather than having, a military force that is not trained to fight a drug war, but trained to fight battles as a military. This is a point that the general had made several times. Like, I'm leading a war effort that we were not trained to do. As he was very anti-drug war. God, I'm kind of getting off track here. But if you allowed for those actions to take place, you could save money and you could save lives. And by having this, war on drugs within Mexico, you are in a way creating a lot of the bloodshed. If it were not for the infighting between different cartels, where there's lots and lots of bloodshed occurring there, where there's danger to citizens a lot of the times because of that bloodshed, it does feel like you do need a protection force, essentially, like a military, to have these operations. God, I kind of got lost in my thoughts there, but essentially it's just there's a case to be made for allowing drug trafficking to occur to prevent violence. But then that doesn't stop the effects of that the drugs have on communities wherever they end up.
Sure. Yeah, but those policies, we should point out places that have decriminalized or legalized various substances. Those policies are also implemented hand in hand with support network policies, right? Like treatment centers, rehab, stuff like that. It definitely feels like there's a political tint to this story that I'm not fully aware of, because for anybody who's wondering, how often does this happen? It's pretty rare for the U.S. law enforcement apparatus to drop drug trafficking charges like this. This guy, the general, was the highest military official in the land at one point in the government of Mexico. And so there are a lot of international observers who are saying that this was on the U.S. side, that this was clearly a political decision to try to preserve the overall relationship and cooperation between the two countries. But it's strange because when Mexico dropped the charges, the latest news is that the U.S. is considering picking those charges back up. So I wonder what they're really fighting about.
Right? It does feel bigger. It really does feel bigger. And there's another piece of this, Ben. According to the end of this AP News article, they are saying that Mexico's Congress very recently passed a law which is going to restrict U.S. agents, like intelligence agents, from being within Mexico. So, like, I'm assuming reducing the number of operations that can occur there and how they would handle that. And also, while they are in Mexico on their soil, they would remove the diplomatic immunity that they would usually be given. And we've talked before on the show about what diplomatic immunity gives you. We recently talked about it with Saudi Arabian citizens who are in the United States and what that means.
Diplomatic immunity is not quite as powerful as being a Saudi Arabian citizen in the U.S.
Almost.
It's around there. It's definitely... The problem is when comparing the two, the diplomatic immunity obeys laws. That's the primary differentiation there between the treatment. But But you're right. Stuff You Should Know, by the way, has a great episode on diplomatic immunity for anybody who wants to learn more. There's a solid argument in the case of this type of law enforcement that some degree of immunity is requisite to accomplish the job and the objectives. But still, it's the war on drugs. It's a huge bag of badgers. It's made a ton of money. It's made a ton of money for the people who claim to be fighting against drugs, right? I don't think that's a controversial claim here in 2021. Uncle Sam made billions off of the drug war, and that is one of the factors that makes it easy to not trust the official narrative, because it's been proven false and intentionally misleading before. I don't know, man. Drugs just make so much money. And you're right, Matt, if there were a situation where things are decriminalized, if not recreationalized, then what we've seen happen so far is that it's not the end of society. It's just a different group of people making drug money. Someone's always going to be making money off of drugs. Someone will always be doing that. It doesn't matter what buzz phrases we use. The big question is, who likes this? Who benefits from the status quo as it stands now? Who would benefit if the status quo changed? And what kind of favors did the general call in? What do you think? He made some phone calls. He had to, right? Or he's got some dirt. I don't know.
I'm sure. The only thing here, Ben, is that this isn't the first time it's happened. The predecessor of Cienfuegos was Genaro Garcia Luna, who was arrested in Texas in December 2019 on charges of taking giant bribes from the Sinaloa cartel in order to help them ship drugs into the U.S. So it may just be a systemic thing or a position. Once you get up to that position, you're kind of the godfather.
Okay. Kind of like if you're the president, every plane you ride in is automatically Air Force One.
Yeah, kind of like that.
I was not aware of Garcia Luna. Noel, what do you think about this report? Do you agree there's something more to the story, or do you think it's just, I don't know. What's your take?
I mean, I'm kind of with you. It does feel a little bit like something is being obscured here. I have no idea what it is, but it's certainly another one to watch, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. And just before you go thinking, oh, it's just weed or something, just give you what Cienfuegos was accused of. He's accused of conspiring with the H2 cartel to smuggle thousands of kilos of cocaine, heroin, meth, and marijuana into the U.S. And that was from 2012 to 2018 while he was defense secretary.
Smuggling meth? Come on,
that's
man.
unusual. Usually that stuff's made domestically.
Right. That's interesting.
And you can see video footage of some of the things being caught. I believe it's on that the Al Jazeera article that I looked at for this. It's called Mexico Ex-Defense Minister Arrested in U.S. on Drug Charges.
Oh, by the way, 1,000 kilos for anybody in the U.S. is a little more than 1 ton.
Whew.
So these are literal tons and tons of drugs.
Yeah.
That's a lot of street doses right there.
Mm-hmm.
Can't imagine. Yeah, super interesting find, Matt.
Yeah, well, who cares if the heads of government can run drugs the way we kind of think the CIA did for a while. I mean, that's what are you going to do? Who cares?
Does. Check out opium production, or check out the poppy production in Afghanistan. Look at the dip under the Taliban, and then look at the rise later.
Stuff they don't want me to think about.
Yeah,
so I can sleep at night.
Not saying it's a one-to-one solidly proven thing, but we've heard from so many members of the military who have told us, we had to protect these crops. There's definitely more to the story. And who really cares about it, I bet? This is a question I wanted to ask toward the end, Matt. I bet Salvador cares. What's he doing now? What's he doing right now? Does he listen to the show?
No, he's chilling.
He's retired though, right? So he's got time.
He's good to go. He's reading something on a porch somewhere.
He was cleared of all charges, right? January 14th, not too long ago as we record this. So he might still be celebrating.
I can totally imagine him just finding a yacht somewhere.
Or a drug sub. I'm sorry. His successor is currently in office, one Luis Gonzalez, and I wonder if he's being referred to as the Godfather. I'm serious. Your point about maybe every secretary becoming a Godfather automatically is interesting. I don't know.
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. I think you got to earn that place. You know, the general and the defense minister is a title, but earning Godfather is probably something a little different. But it is weird. It is weird to think that top cartel officials, top cartel members would be visiting with a defense minister. That's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's enough for this, guys. If you have any information on this, hey, did you work with the Godfather? You want to tell us a story? We're here. You can talk to us, unless it'll endanger you or us or anyone else. Don't
Go
talk.
for it.
No, don't do it. I don't want to go down for this, dude. All right. So you can find us on social media. We're all over the place. Conspiracy Stuff in most places. Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram.
Yeah, a great place to tell us your tale would be to give us a call at our toll-free hotline, where you will hear Ben's dulcet tones welcoming you to leave your own personal 3-minute message / story. Please let us know if it's okay to use your name or what you'd like us to call you. And if you'd like us to not use your name at all, we can also do that. That number is 1-833-STDWYTK.
And if you are on the internet feeling charitable, why not throw us a rating on your pod scraper podcatcher of choice? It does matter. We do appreciate it. If none of that quite smuggles your drugs across the border, there's one other way you can always contact us. Let us know your opinion on the biblical Ark of the Covenant. Let us know your opinion on underreporting in Ethiopia. Let us know what you think about the origins of what we're calling COVID-19. You can do all that and more by sending us a simple email where we are.
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com. Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.